It's time for Vax Talk. Let's talk VPDs. We're shaping the conversation about vaccines. To learn more, visit vaxtalk.org.
Hi, and welcome to Vax Talk. My name is Karen Ernst, and I'm the Executive Director of Voices for Vaccines. I forgot to say that this is the podcast for all the pregnant ladies.
Will you sing that for us?
All the pregnant ladies, all the pregnant ladies. Okay.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Thanks.
And I'm Nathan Boonstra. I'm a general pediatrician here at Blank Children's Hospital in Des Moines, Iowa.
And we are coming to you during the first week of National Immunization Awareness Month, which is the entire month of August. Super duper exciting. National Immunization Awareness Month is exactly what it sounds like. It's for the nation of the United States, but we invite our worldwide friends to join with us. And it is giving awareness about immunizations. That pretty much covers it, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of a month where we just want to make sure that we're focusing on different aspects of immunizations and bringing more understanding, more awareness to areas that that people may not normally think about. At least that's what we're trying to do this month with our podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important for people to know that immunizations span the entire lifespan. Mm-hmm. In fact, they start before, a person's actually born. So every stage of life, there are vaccines that are specific to that stage for those people. And if you're a grown-up sitting on the train listening to us right now, you probably are eligible for some vaccines that you need as well.
Yeah, it's worth checking out. So a lot of adults, I think, don't realize that there are vaccines that they need. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in adult vaccines because I don't take care of grown-ups all that often. But
you are a grown-up.
But I am a grown-up. So I do know, and I have checked with my doctor to make sure that I'm up to date with all the shots that I should have at this age. And fortunately, I spend enough time thinking about vaccines that I know what age I'm going to need my next one and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I get my flu shot every year, as I'm sure you do, Karen.
Oh, yes. I actually went in a couple of years ago because we were headed to Hawaii, and I happened to know that in Hawaii there was a hepatitis A outbreak that started in a sushi restaurant near where we were going to be staying, and sushi is one of my favorite things in the world.
Yes.
So I went into my doctor and said, there's this hepatitis A outbreak that started at a sushi restaurant in Hawaii, and we're going to Hawaii, so I need a hepatitis A vaccine. And she said, I had no idea that was a thing, but a hepatitis A vaccine is a perfectly reasonable thing for an adult to get anyhow. So when people ask me, I don't give medical advice, but I'm always like, if you eat food prepared by other people, it's worth talking to your doctor about whether or not you need a hepatitis A vaccine.
Yeah, and I think actually people should ask that at each of their visits because there are plenty of adult doctors out there who don't they're fantastic doctors, but thinking about adult vaccinations because it's such a smaller part of practice than for a pediatrician, where at every visit we're thinking, is this child up to date? This child needs vaccines at 2, 4, 6 months, needs a flu shot, needs 12 months, 15 months. Like, it's really part of our repertoire continuously. So it's a part of our thought process and our workflow. But that's not necessarily true about every adult doctor out there. So I would recommend everybody just tack that on to your physical and just say, am I totally up to date with vaccines, or are there any vaccines that are recommended for me at this point? And they can at least give a glance at that and make sure that there's nothing that's glaring that's missing.
Right. And there's one subset of adults that we're focusing on this week in particular, and that is, as I said at the top of the show, all the pregnant ladies. Mm-hmm. So maternal vaccines are really important. I'm calling them maternal vaccines on purpose, not just adult vaccines, because with a lot of the vaccines, depending on when you give them, you're not just vaccinating mom, you're vaccinating two people. You're vaccinating mom and baby. And there's a lot of research going into maternal vaccines right now as far as how can we best protect babies right away when they're the most vulnerable against diseases that would do the most damage to them. And so that's what we're talking about today is maternal vaccines.
You have this gap period in which, as a pediatrician, what I'm worried about with a baby is this period in which they can't get a whooping cough vaccine yet. They can't get a Tdap yet. The Tdap, unlike, say, hepatitis B vaccine, can't be given at birth. But they're most vulnerable. A newborn baby that gets whooping cough is the most likely to have a bad outcome, potentially death. And so this gap in which you can't immunize until they're 2 months, but they're most at risk from the disease, is a scary part. So this topic of pregnancy vaccines affects us as pediatricians. We actually think about it a fair amount because we worry about these newborns. So even though I'm usually not in a position to be able to talk with every mom, every family before they have their baby about how important these vaccines are, unless they come in for like a prenatal discussion with a pediatrician, it's very important to us as pediatricians that people are thinking about their pregnancy vaccines.
Right. And it's been a decade since I've been pregnant, actually more than a decade. But even then, being a pregnant person is really complex. There's a million tests and a million things you have to go through. I used to have to carry, a little vial of pee around in my purse because I had to bring that into the doctor. Fun times.
Yeah.
So the idea of immunization can be difficult for both the OB or midwife and the mom to remember, but it is important for families and for pregnant women to say to their doctors, can we check my vaccines? Am I up to date? What vaccines do I need? So today we actually have a really exciting interview. We taped it ahead of time. I'm not going to do the thing where I pretend like I don't know what we're going to say.
We're so convincing on that.
Yeah. But we taped ahead of time this great interview with Heidi Murkoff, who wrote the What to Expect series and has the whattoexpect.com website, and there's an app, and there's all sorts of great things. And it's a great interview. One of my key takeaways from her really was how much compassion and how much empathy she has for people who are expecting a baby, how complex it is, as I said, and how much we can care for them through the process of learning about immunizations and immunizing themselves. Did you have a key takeaway you wanted to?
Well, in addition to that compassion that she shows for people who are expecting, she, we asked her questions about, well, what kind of reaction do you get when you talk about vaccines? Do you get much blowback in terms of the anti-vaccine community? And she's very compassionate with them too. She reflects a lot of that philosophy that people who who choose not to immunize or who are kind of against vaccinations, the run-of-the-mill person in that category is not necessarily your hardcore science denier or conspiracy theorist, as you may run into online sometimes, but somebody who has, for one reason or another, had bad information, and she really wants to contribute to that positive information, what you can find out there in terms of good information, and contribute to that. And you can really tell that from the things that she says about why she decided to start writing these books.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's go ahead and turn it over to the interview then. And I guess that's it.
That's it. Let's go. Roll tape.
Now we are joined by the eminent Heidi Murkoff, who is the author of the What to Expect series, including one of my favorite pregnancy books, What to Expect When You're Expecting. And she has 2 adult children because she started having children very, very young.
Yes. I said kindergarten. Can I go younger than that now?
Absolutely. And she's a friendly and wonderful person with many experiences, and we're so excited to have her. So welcome, Heidi.
Thank you. I also have 2 grandsons at the moment.
How old are they?
5 and just born.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Congrats.
Thank you.
You recently had an experience with the youngest guy that really underscored your support for vaccines. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Actually, this was Lennox, who's the older of the 2. He's now 5, but when he was just 3 weeks old, he was hospitalized for an infection, a staph infection, that he developed sepsis, and so he was hospitalized for about 8 days. At 3 weeks, I think he was 2 weeks at first, and 3 weeks, he was exposed to measles while in the hospital. They had, for some reason, put an adult with measles in the pediatric area. So all the kids there were exposed, but he was only 3 weeks old.
Wow.
He only weighed about 6 pounds at that point, maybe even slightly less. And so it was like adding insult to injury, but he had to go back to the hospital to get a shot of immunoglobulins and to hopefully protect him. And he was fine. But the idea that he could be exposed in the hospital as a fragile newborn who already had some health challenges because of his infection, that was really scary. And it made me, first of all, realize, this was someone who had come over on an airplane, as many people do with infections, and expose a very vulnerable population. That's one of the reasons why, I've always been an advocate for vaccines. And I'm not old enough to remember polio, but I'm old enough to remember German measles and measles, mumps. My brother had mumps. I have some perspective on that, but every time I hear a story like Lennox's, I wonder why parents will willingly, knowingly not vaccinate their kids.
Well, and you've had travels too that have sort of shown you the difference between a community that vaccinates and a community that can't vaccinate.
Yes, we work with International Medical Corps on maternal health. So we've visited South Sudan twice. We were in Sierra Leone just after the Ebola crisis, where maternal health had been devastated by Ebola, and also vaccine immunization rates had dropped dramatically because nobody was going to clinics to get vaccines or nutritional screening or anything, because everybody saw hospitals and clinics as a place where people went to die from Ebola. So that perspective, we've also been with refugee populations on the border of Somalia. And of course, these families face many risks, but among them are vaccine-preventable childhood diseases that spread easily. Now, I've seen programs in South Sudan where community workers are trained to spread the word about vaccines and encourage parents to get vaccines, but the infrastructure is just not there. Mm-hmm. And being able to keep vaccines safe and stable in those kinds of environments where there's no infrastructure is very, very challenging. But the other thing is that often those who go around immunizing put their lives at risk, and they're often killed. Factions who believe that vaccines are not safe and are actually evil. They're lucky there to get any kind of vaccines at all.
Mm-hmm. You've done all sorts of work for really decades with women who are obviously expecting babies, people who are pregnant, and communicating with people who are pregnant. And your network has sort of grown a little bit. So, before I ask you about how you've involved vaccines in it, can you just kind of explain what's happened to what to expect when you're expecting, since it was just a book and now what it is now?
Well, the mission hasn't changed. It's always a bit about helping parents stress less and enjoy pregnancy more and enjoy being parents more, about arming them with the information that they need, not overwhelming them, not being prescriptive, but sort of holding their hands through an experience that certainly I was terrified by the first time I was pregnant, but I didn't have a resource to turn to. So, motherhood being the mother of invention, 2 hours before I went into labor with Emma, I delivered a proposal for what to expect when you're expecting. And the mission then was as simple as it could possibly be. I just wanted to help other parents sleep better at night than I had and Eric had. I decided to write a book, which I never expected anyone to read, and that was okay. If a couple of people bought it and they felt that they been reassured by what they read and informed, because knowledge is power. It's especially powerful when you're pregnant. From there, other books, wrote other books, but the mission has, though it hasn't changed, it certainly has grown. And that's to include the work we do with the foundation, as well as an app. And the books keep evolving as well. So now I'm in the 5th edition of What to Expect When You're Expecting. And things change. There's lots about pregnancy that never changes. You're still bloated and queasy and constipated. But and it's still approximately 9 months, but lots of things do change. Among them, the vaccines that you are recommended to receive during pregnancy.
So when you were talking a little bit about a moment ago about how one of your goals is to make things not overwhelming, to make things relatively simple and understandable. Mm-hmm. When we talk about the vaccine conversation, sometimes that is very overwhelming for parents. Yes. Not only do they not necessarily know, even if they're on board and they want to get, what is best for their baby, so they want to get the immunizations, they may not know when and what do they need and how to ask or what to do. But then for those even that may not necessarily know whether they're on board or not, can feel very overwhelmed. So how do you phrase that? How did you approach that when you talked about vaccinations in your books and in the things that you do?
When you're pregnant, of course, you're overwhelmed by thousands of questions and concerns. I would say you're probably not so much doing your homework on vaccinations yet as you are, wondering about all the decisions you have to make about childbirth and about, registries. There's so many decisions that you have to make as a parent. Probably one of the most important decisions you have to make as a parent, though, is to immunize your child. There are very few absolutes in parenting. There really are not even a handful. There's 2. In my mind, it's loving your child unconditionally and keeping your child healthy and safe. So for me, one of the absolutes is immunization within keeping your child healthy and safe. But I think part of the problem is that parents these days, whereas it used to be when I was pregnant, there was a lack of information for new moms and expectant moms and new dads and expectant dads. Now there's a situation where we're overloaded with information, where much of the information is conflicting and a lot of the information we can't necessarily trust. So you have to sort through websites and opinions and message boards, all of which are telling you different things. So you don't know who to trust, who to believe. That's hopefully where What to Expect comes in. I'd like to think a more trusted source. Mm-hmm. Again, not didactic, not preaching a certain agenda, but just informing parents about what they need to know, and where there's a choice, letting them know what the choices are. Because there's attachment parenting, and there's parents who don't want, who only want to wear their babies, and there are parents who want to sleep with their babies, and there are parents who don't want to sleep with their babies, and there's women who feel it's super, super important to have a natural childbirth, unmedicated, and there are parents who believe that an epidural, there are moms who sign up for an epidural before they even become pregnant. So there's all of these different factions, but where there's a choice, let them, tell them what the options are, let them make their own choice, because every pregnant woman is different, every parent is different, every baby is different. But when it comes to those absolutes, like immunization, I feel just the facts, Mom. Just the facts.
And the women have to start making choices about vaccines probably before they realize they do. Women are probably thinking, oh, of course I want to prevent measles in my baby, but baby's 1 year old. There's actually diseases you can prevent against before the baby is even born.
Yeah, and I think a lot of women come into pregnancy not realizing that there will be vaccines involved, and a lot of people have feelings about the flu vaccine. Oh, whenever I get the flu vaccine, I get the flu. Of course, that's not true. Or that that's a sort of optional thing. But they come into pregnancy and realize that there are vaccines that are highly recommended, that are standard for expecting moms, like the flu vaccine if you're going to be pregnant during flu season, but also the Tdap booster with each and every pregnancy. Also making sure that everyone who is going to be around your baby, including dad, including those grandparents, including any care providers, including siblings who are, whose immunity may have waned since they got their first set of vaccines. So all of these people who are going to be surrounding the baby with love, also have to cocoon the baby by being immunized themselves with a Tdap booster. There's also vaccines that you might want to consider getting before you become pregnant. I'm a big supporter of preconception planning, although my first pregnancy was completely an oops, but 50% of pregnancies in the U.S. are unplanned, 50% are planned, and if you take those steps before you become pregnant, you still need the Tdap, but you can make sure that your immunity to measles, mumps, and rubella is where it should be. Make sure all your HEPs are up to date. That's a discussion to have with your doctor before you even decide to become pregnant.
That's great advice.
I'm curious about whether you've gotten questions in on that or what the response has been. So I sometimes in talking to other authors, they've written stuff about vaccinations and then they've gotten a lot of pushback, or they've been kind of like, well, I really liked what you said about this, but boy, I don't think that you've done your research when it comes to vaccines. Have you gotten much response in terms of the vaccine community with your books in particular?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. I try just to present the facts, represent the facts, rather than try to argue against their misinformation.
Sure.
I think that's important. I also think it's important not to blame parents for this, because the one thing that I can say about every mom and every dad is they want what's best for their baby. Mm-hmm. That's their goal. So when we start talking about parents who don't vaccinate because they've heard or they've become entrenched in the anti-vax movement, they don't always know better because they have been misinformed. They do think that they're doing what's best for their baby. They do think that they're protecting their baby. So it's our responsibility to present the facts as we know them, as we're sure of them. And if parents are exposed to anti-vaxxers, anti-fax, I guess you could call them.
Hey, that's a new one.
Yeah.
That's great.
Then we have to just present the facts back as they are.
Yeah, it seems that you approach a lot of what you do with parents, but particularly, in pregnancy, around vaccines, that you approach it with a lot of compassion. And I'm wondering if you feel like that compassion works, if you've seen results that you feel like this is, not only does it feel right, but I feel I've seen it work.
Yeah, and I think that being empathetic, understanding that they are trying to do what's best for their babies is key, rather than attacking them for beliefs that they've settled on simply because they've been misinformed. So I think that's helpful, just to be empathetic and to understand why they're believing the things that they're believing. I think compassion, of course, is a very important part of it. Another important part of it is not judging, and that goes across the board, whatever I'm talking about, because I have a daughter who struggled 2 times to produce breast milk. She did absolutely everything that a person could do, from herbal remedies to ordering drugs from Canada to doing acupuncture and wearing needles behind her ears and under her fingertips, cupping, everything. Plus had lactation support on a daily basis. And she was unable to produce breast milk. So the last thing we need to do is judge anyone about things like that, when what they want to do is do the best for their baby. And the same with immunization. So you can support them, empathize, show them compassion, but most of all, give them the facts, clearly with Emma not being able to breastfeed, all the facts in the world, she was already convinced that she wanted to breastfeed. She was already convinced that was the best thing for her baby. But to judge her because she couldn't produce breast milk, well, that's crazy. So we need to support parents with their choices, assuming those choices are safe ones. And when they're not safe ones, to empower them with information.
We do a lot of talking on this podcast about how there is that difference between parents who choose not to immunize because of, like you said, they're doing what they believe to be best for their children, but the information that's out there, as you mentioned earlier, there is so much, and it is so inundating, and there is a difficulty. It takes a lot of discernment to separate the wheat from the chaff. So yes. I greatly appreciate having good, factual, easy to understand information that's out there, such as in your books, that is widespread and well respected and earns people's trust and allows them to take in those facts and make those decisions using information from reliable sources. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being a part of that conversation.
Well, I think it's a team effort, so we're all playing on the same team for sure. Getting parents that vital information and supporting them through this journey, which is sometimes bewildering, and maybe more so now than ever.
Heidi, people are probably listening to this thinking, well, I'm pregnant, and you mentioned flu vaccines and the Tdap, the tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis vaccines. I'm supposed to get those? When am I supposed to get those? What's the deal with those? When are people supposed to get those?
With a flu vaccine, if you're pregnant during flu season, which you likely are going to be because it runs a lot longer than people believe, you want to get your flu vaccine as early as possible and you can have it at any point during pregnancy. The nice thing is if you happen to be getting it towards the end of your pregnancy, that it will have, and that with timing is everything, you have to get it no matter what, as early as possible in flu season. But if that season happens to coincide with the end of your pregnancy, then you're also going to be giving your baby some protection once your baby is born. So the baby will be actually born with some protection against flu. If not, you're still cocooning your baby, plus you're preventing all the complications that can come with getting flu during pregnancy. Pregnant women are far more likely to be hospitalized for flu complications, to develop pneumonia. The best way to approach it is prevention, because pregnant women are, to a certain extent, immune compromised. So any kind of infection is going to hit them harder and pose challenges to their pregnancy and risks to their babies. Get your flu vaccine, belly up to the pharmacy or to your OB. Often OBs will also provide flu shots. The Tdap vaccine, which you need to get with every pregnancy, not just once. Dads get away with only getting it once, but pregnant women need to get it in the last trimester of every pregnancy. They usually recommend about 27 weeks, somewhere in the 30s of pregnancy, and you're just ask your OB or your midwife about when you can expect to get your Tdap vaccine.
Well, thank you so much. It was just a pleasure talking to you today, Heidi. I know that everybody enjoyed listening to you, and you've got just so much great information and such a passion for parenting and pregnancy, and I'm very grateful for everything you do, but especially that you are a person who's willing to tell parents what they need to know about vaccines. So if people want to find more information about all of the what to expect, I mentioned what to expect when you're expecting, but I'll tell you that what to expect the first year and what to expect the toddler years were very important in our family too.
Actually, it's now called what to expect the second year.
Oh.
So
tells you how old I am.
Yeah, well, tells you how old I am. So yes, and also there's an app for that as well.
That's lovely.
The What to Expect app and whattoexpect.com. Yeah. Lots of information there as well. But you can get all your information about vaccines through any of those sources, plus your doctor. Very important.
Absolutely.
If you have any questions, you should always ask the pediatrician or your OB or midwife.
And you took the words out of your mouth. I was going to ask you where people could find more information, but it's whattoexpect.com.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Excellent. So thank you so much, and it was wonderful talking to Heidi.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you to everybody who listens to our podcast, and especially who listened to this one. My name is Karen Ernst. I am the Executive Director of Voices for Vaccines. You can find us at voicesforvaccines.org.
And I'm Nathan Boonstra. I'm a general pediatrician here in Des Moines, Iowa, at Blank Children's Hospital. Look for me on Facebook or on Twitter with the handle at PedsGeekMD or on my blog at PedsGeekMD.com.
We'll talk to you guys next week for Babies and Young Children Week. Bye-bye.
Bye.